essential knowledge, critical dispositions, and performances that help foster development of learners. According to Sapolsky and Moniz, these are a list of skills which define global competence. In accordance with this, Sapolsky and Moniz have described a globally competent teacher to have knowledge of the world, critical global issues, their local impact, and the cultural backgrounds of learners. They should also have the ability to incorporate this knowledge and sensitivity into classroom practice. Hi, my name is Yasmin. I'm a pre-service teacher in the 4th and final year of my degree. Throughout this course, I've gained immense knowledge about my individual responsibility as a teacher. I've learned that I have a very important voice within my classroom and that I'm a role model for my students, and that I am accountable for what they learn and how they learn it. I began this presentation by defining global competency, alongside what it means for a teacher to inherit this global competence. As suggested by Sapolsky and Moniz, I both agree and actively support the notion that it is the teacher's duty within a classroom to model socially responsible and acceptable behaviours. As a result, this hence encourages learners and creates opportunities for them to continue these actions. Throughout this presentation, I will be using both relevant literature and real-life examples to convince you, my audience, why there is a need for teachers to continuously engage with global trends and issues. In my attempt to do so, I'll be exploring several characteristics of globally competent teachers, explaining their relevance and importance within a classroom, and linking these to current global issues. To begin, I'd like to bring your attention to the 5th and 6th characteristics of a globally competent teacher, as suggested by Sapolsky and Moniz. The 5th characteristic states that educators should be able to value the input of culturally and linguistically diverse learners, families, and colleagues, and modeling cultural sensitivity. While the 6th characteristic highlights the importance of creating environments that encourage positive cross-cultural interaction. In my opinion, I believe that these characteristics work in accordance with one another. During my 3rd year as a pre-service teacher, I completed a placement at an Islamic high school in Preston. I had the pleasure of teaching Year 7 English students. For me, this placement was one of the first that reminded me of why I chose this career path. It was challenging in many different ways. I was forced to learn to manage a whole classroom on my own, forced to manage challenging behaviours at the same time. The majority of the students during this placement were from a very similar ethnic background. However, they were quite culturally diverse. In one of my Year 7 classes, I had an EAL student. Most of the learning tasks I created were differentiated for this student. Although the students were young, they were aged around 11 to 12 years old, I did try my best to explain to them the importance of allowing this EAL student to take his time whilst reading or writing. Reflecting on this particular experience has reminded me of the 4 key components that Shea Kirchhoff suggested in her YouTube video about global teaching. The first of these was known as situated. Kirchhoff explains how situated practice refers to developing a relationship with the students and with people around us. She states that learning is social, and when we can create an environment that is safe to take risks and where everyone has a voice, where we are appreciative of what we can learn from others and also share our knowledge with others so that they can learn from us. That is situated practice. This is a practice which I unknowingly at the time attempted to incorporate within my classroom. It was important for me to explain to the students that this particular student that they could see was struggling. He was one of them. He was their friend. He was their peer. This eventually led to the conversation that when someone in the room is speaking, it is our duty as a class to create a safe environment for that person, no matter what cultural or linguistic differences there were. By sharing this real-life example and even reflecting on this experience for myself as a pre-service teacher, I'm able to identify and acknowledge the fact that I have been practicing global competency as a teacher. The example also allows me to share evidence with you as to why having these conversations is important. It indirectly addresses and avoids global issues such as racism or even bullying to occur down the track in the future. Additionally, this experience can be related to one of the major global trends, the cultural agenda. The cultural agenda refers to the journey taken by many different nations in order to ensure that their individual culture and identity is strengthened and maintained and can endure the rise of globalization and migration. This can be applied within our own education system. Whilst it is important for students to respect one another and to welcome cultural diversity amongst their peers, it is equally as important, if not more, for educators to instill this mentality within their students. and to create safe and respectful environments for their students. Civitello et al. Explore the notion of culturally responsive teaching, explaining how it is not only a set of teaching strategies, but it requires teachers holding beliefs and consider cultural diversity as a positive attribute and valuable resource in teaching and learning. Both the literature provided, as well as my personal experience as an educator, demonstrate both how and why culture agenda as a global trend is an extremely urgent and critical issue within our education system. To be culturally aware is an attribute which all teachers, schools, and educators should aim to acquire. This allows us to create safe, welcoming, and positive environments for all of our students. Moving on to the 10th and final characteristic of a globally competent teacher, as outlined by Sepulsa and Muniz. In my opinion, I believe that although all 10 of the listed characteristics are extremely crucial to determining a teacher's global competence, I believe that this one is of the utmost importance. My reasoning behind this lies in the characteristic itself. If we break it down, the first word we hear is advocate. By definition, an advocate is an individual who supports or recommends a particular cause. As educators, I believe we are our students' biggest advocates. When they lose confidence in themselves, we advocate for them. When a parent loses faith in their child, we advocate for their child. When a student is nominated for an award, even something as small as a sports award, it is always the teachers who are on the sideline advocating for them. My point here is that we are advocates. With that being said, the same way we advocate for our students, we should advocate for global education. Global education, by definition, refers to educating oneself on the world around them. As teachers, we must advocate for our students gaining an awareness and developing a sense of self within society. We must educate our students on unity, diversity, and independence. By enlightening them on such topics, we're essentially preparing them for the real world. Advocating for this can be done through small and simple acts, such as encouraging students to watch the news with their parents one night after school, or even by initiating class discussions on major political or economical issues occurring in the world. Doing this introduces them to real-world issues while simultaneously ensuring that we, as educators, are aware of the global issues and trends occurring, so that we are able to adjust our teachings accordingly, as well as have the ability to communicate with students on topics that matter and topics that they care about or that are affecting them, especially with teenage students as well. Research has shown that global education was attempted in the education system in England. Bourne reported that despite a challenging educational climate, global learning is clearly having an impact on many schools in England. It emerged from a desire to secure greater understanding of international and development issues. This further supports my claim. The final part of this characteristic is advocating for social responsibility. Social responsibility refers to the duty that each individual has to work and cooperate with other individuals within society. As teenagers, it is completely normal for students to come across peers with whom they may clash with or struggle to get along with. I myself have witnessed this firsthand on my placement. I've dealt with several instances in which the students become irritated with one another and there's tension in the classroom and it just doesn't create a good atmosphere. During that time, it was my duty as a teacher and the educator in the room to advocate for social responsibility, to enlighten the students of the reality of when they leave high school and when they graduate, they'll be working in an office or they'll be working with people that they may not necessarily like, but it is their duty and their responsibility to adapt and take accountability for themselves and their actions within that society. Finally, before I end this presentation, I would like to leave you all with some food for thought. As you continue on with the rest of your day, I'd like you to consider the following questions. As a human, what steps are you taking to ensure you're portraying global awareness for the people around you? If you are unable to answer this question, ask yourself, why is it not something that you've considered before? Why do you not consider it important enough? Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for the time that you've spent watching. I hope that my presentation was able to enlighten you and to convince you on the drastic influence that educators have, and hence why it is so important that we are globally competent. Thank you.